Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we continue our Fantasy Files series with a look at Justin Fields, hopeful, please, for the love of God, Bears QB1 in the year 2021, sooner rather than later. Now, before we get on to this, I must admit I am a Columbus, Ohio lifer, big-time Ohio State Buckeye fan, at time an ignorant one. So if you hear me going too far overboard, keep that in mind. But ever since I've been a professional in this field, obviously I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But with all that said, let's go through what we should expect from Fields, Andy Dalton, and this Bears quarterback competition ahead of 2021. And the first thing is first, it's just been weird with some of these quotes from Matt Nagy, and that's been the best way to describe it, weird. Ever since the Bears traded up to get Fields at number 11, City of Chicago has been thrilled, as they should be. Have you guys seen the list of Bears quarterbacks in that franchise's history? The problem is that ever since they had that great draft and everybody was giving, the Bears at like usually an A, at worst like a B. I think they were almost a consensus A draft though. Nagy, Ryan Pace, on the hot seat, seemingly. At least they need to do something big. They seemingly did that in the draft. They got their guy Fields, helped out the offensive line. People were loving it. It's been everything that's happened since the draft that's kind of caused some concern, because historically, we just do not see quarterbacks that are drafted this high sit on the bench. And Fields was pick number 11. So my study about the, past top 10 picks is off by one. So if you excuse that for a second, I think you'll kind of see that typically first round quarterbacks are drafted as high as they are in order to play. Specifically, since 2010, every single top 10 quarterback except 4 have started at least 10 games. And those 4 that didn't start 10 games were Tua, who started 9, Jared Goff, who started 7, Patrick Mahomes, who started 1, and Jake Locker, who did not start a single game. So Trey Lance, Justin Fields, obviously Trevor Lawrence is already going to be under there in week 1. Both these guys, Lance and Fields, history tells us they'll be out there sooner rather than later. I would just say, though, these quotes from Nagy not looking great. Specifically, right after the draft, I think it was in like May 16th, might have been the specific date. So a couple of weeks after the draft, but Matt Nagy stated, Andy is the starter. Ryan Pace was saying Andy is the starter. And the hilarious part about this was in the same freaking interview, Nagy goes out and says Andy is a starter. And then he also says Dalton is essentially like a rookie as well, because, he hasn't played for the Bears. And this is the part that makes the whole Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, like the way they did that in Kansas City and Nagy wants to do that in Chicago. That's the part that is just so infuriating to me, trying to figure out like why they're trying to use that as the example. Obviously, it worked out great for the Chiefs, but Alex Smith was at worst an average starter in Kansas City for 4 straight seasons. Andy Dalton hasn't been an average starter for at least 4 seasons. He's always been a sum of his parts quarterback. And when you're trying to compare these guys, I just don't see it, people. But that was the first alarming quote. The second one was actually on PFF's under the PFF podcast umbrella, the Chris Collinsworth podcast, where Collinsworth asked Matt Nagy if there's any way that Fields will start week 1. Nagy stated, no, Andy is our starter. Now, if you listen to the entire podcast, it does paint a more reasonable picture. The Bears are simply trying to do what's best for Fields, progress him, not throw him to the fire against Aaron Donald and company in week 1. I get it. It just doesn't seem like when we have literally the Eagles have not named Jalen Hurts their official starting quarterback yet. The Washington football team hasn't named Ryan Fitzpatrick their starting quarterback. It's, like you'll even hear, I'm not sure if Bruce Arians has specifically done this, but it sounds like something he would say, like not even naming Brady the starter. Everyone wants to be out here competing, meritocracy, all that. It makes sense why coaches, say these ridiculous things where they don't name a guy a starter. The fact Nagy has done the opposite, it just doesn't make much sense to me, but we'll see. It's not Nagy's job to make sure, the public knows his plans, and he's doing his thing. If the Bears are good with it, if it works out for Fields, then so be it. It's concerning, guys. I mean, it'd be a hell of a lot easier if we knew what his plan was. Now we're forced to kind of try to figure out what it's going to be. So with that said, I want to quickly go over just Fields as the prospect. If you haven't, if you've been living under a rock and just not watching any Ohio State games over these past 2 years, you might be falling into the typical trap of, he's just going to be the next bust from Ohio State. Just realize, people, how different the offense was under Ryan Day with Dwayne Haskins basically feeding pop passes and screens to Paris Campbell, the occasional Terry McLaurin deep ball, but such a high percentage of Haskins' yards came after the catch compared to Fields, who was PFF's number 1 highest graded quarterback when targeting someone after his first read. So Fields, despite getting, the hate about being, not able to get off his read, holding on the ball for too long, and just being an Ohio State quarterback, a lot of this stuff is unfair. And he does hold the ball long. He had, I believe, the single highest, the longest average release time from getting the snap among draft eligible quarterbacks. But we see that with Deshaun Watson, with Russell Wilson, where, yeah, they take some unnecessary sacks. And they also create some freaking crazy plays, because when you're a quarterback that gets under pressure, you only have a couple options. You can take the sack, you can try to force a throw that's not there, you can throw the ball away, or you can try to make something big happen out of the play. And I think that's why these true playmakers get into trouble sometimes. But it's just, a bit of a catch-22 thing. I mean, you don't want them to lose that playmaking instinct that makes some of these guys so great. You also want them to play a little bit more into the offense. So, yeah, Fields holds the ball a little bit too long from time to time, but I'll take a quarterback that has the ability to work off script and try to get them a little bit, to work more in the confines of the offense. Like, give me someone that can work off script, and we'll work on the on script stuff. That's my point. Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, some of these guys that just have no chance of creating anything if the play dies. I think we're seeing that type of, prospect just not completely lose the ability to play in the NFL by any stretch of the imagination. I realize Tom Brady just won another Super Bowl, not being mobile at all, but we are seeing more and more prospects at least flash the ability to be able to work out a play when the initial read is not there. So our specific quote on Fields from our 2021 NFL draft guide, courtesy of the always great Mike Renner. You'll hear about the knocks on Fields throughout this draft process, from the track record of Ohio State quarterbacks to his ugly games against Indiana and Northwestern to his slow processing and decision-making. I'm not here to say those concerns aren't valid, but the physical tools and leadership he brings to the position are too great to ignore. Over the course of his career, Fields has been one of the most accurate quarterbacks we've ever charted. In his first game against Nebraska this season, he didn't let go of a single off-target pass, adding his rushing ability, and that's a winning combo. True rocket launcher for an arm. I mean, that throw he had against Clemson to hit Olave down the middle was just a thing of beauty. So the speed, ran a 4.33 at Ohio State's pro day. It was a 4.44, I think. See, there's my homerism getting in the way of, accurate reporting or whatever you want to call it. But Fields can run, super athlete. Like, he averaged 38 rushing yards per game, 39 rushing yards per game at Ohio State. He fits the archetype of what we expect from a successful rookie QB. And since 2010, we've only seen 7 first-year quarterbacks function as a top 12 fantasy producer. Those 7, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, RG3, Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert. Other guys were plenty successful in their spurts. We just didn't see them really have that full season of starts. And that is, unfortunately, the part that's going to elude Fields potentially, but he does fit the average. All these guys I just listed average at least 25 rushing yards per game in college, except Justin Herbert. As we saw with Herbert, though, had a little bit more athleticism than I think Oregon really tapped into. So Fields, if he can get on the damn field, pun and no pun intended there, he should have a chance to be a fantasy stud immediately. We just need Andy Dalton to get out of the way, and hopefully, people, this won't be an issue for that long. Because if Dalton keeps playing like he did last year, it's not going to be hard for Nagy to make this decision. I mean, in the same offense that Dak Prescott balled the hell out in, Dalton finished with the following ranks in these various statistics. PFF passing grade, he was tied for 21st among 44 qualified quarterbacks. Not bad. Big time throw rate, 36, turnover-worthy play rate, 12th, yards per attempt, tied for 33rd, adjusted completion rate, 21st, and QB rating, 29th. I mean, Mitch Trubisky actually posted a better big-time throw rate, more yards per attempt, and had a higher QB rating. Now, Dalton, it's very, when I stand like Drew Lock and stuff, and you just kind of say, if you just remove the turnovers, he's great. They're so important. And if Dalton can just be a game manager and not turn over the ball and, just let the defense play great, let Allen Robinson do his thing, there's a path to him being a competent quarterback. Just don't get carried away, people. I mean, remember, do not ever tell me that Dalton is good because of the Pro Bowls, because the Pro Bowls stopped meaning a damn thing to any of us when Trevor freaking Siemian declined an invite to, I believe, the 2016 Pro Bowl. But regardless of how you feel about Andy Dalton in the year 2021, which, again, I think is as a dirt average quarterback, even playing behind that banged-up Cowboys offensive line. Again, Dak made so much more of that situation. I think we've just seen that from Dalton throughout his career. The second the Bengals had to pay him, that's when things started going south because, as I said before, he has always been a sum of its parts quarterback. But let's say he starts playing like better than he has in recent years. That's nothing for fantasy. We just cannot draft Dalton because he hasn't given us a reason to for the last half decade. In 2016, he was a QB 17 in fantasy points per game, followed that up with QB 26, QB 23, QB 21, most recently QB 34 performances. Please, for the love of God, do not draft Andy Dalton. And people, I'm a little worried about how Fields will do this first year. This is not like an amazing offense to be dropping a rookie into. They have PFF's 27th ranked offensive line going into the year. I love Allen Robinson. You love Allen Robinson. He's a stud number one. But behind him, we have Darnell Mooney. He did some really good things. We should be behind him. But then what? We got Marquise Goodwin, Daz Newsome, Anthony Miller still on the team for right now. We got Jimmy Graham's corpse, soaking up some red zone looks, Cole Kmet, maybe the next big thing at tight end. But like every team in the league has at least a couple guys. Like even the Eagles, we can talk about Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. The Bears have a below average receiving room, wide receiver and tight end combined. Like, I don't think that's, again, I'm not trying to hate on Allen Robinson. Please don't frame this as me hating on A-Rob. That dude is an absolute stud alpha wide receiver one. But in today's NFL, you need more than one proven high-end receiver. Unfortunately, that's all the Bears have right now. And even if you want to really just say Mooney's going to be a next big thing as well, that's still only two proven receivers in this entire offense. So, maybe Damiere Byrd just really figures it out this year. Riley Ridley takes a step forward. A lot of unproven pieces in an offense that really should not have the benefit of the doubt. Justin Fields would hardly be the first, potentially great quarterback to not be that great as a rookie. I just don't want to, assume that he's being dropped into this offense that's going to make the best of his, talents. Has every single quarterback that's ever played for the Chicago Bears really been like bad? Okay, with all due respect, Jim McMahon, even Jay Cutler and some of these other guys. Like, it's the same thing with Washington, the Cleveland Browns, the Browns jersey with, the 25 names on it. Did all those guys really suck, or would it have something to do with the organization that was developing them? That's the question we got to ask with this franchise. Finally, people, now comes the sexy part of the question. We got to figure out when Fields is going to be on the field, and it's not looking great early. Here's the thing. Yes, they're playing Aaron Donald and company in week one. I have a very hard time believing, though, that Matt Nagy would jump through all these hoops, name Andy the starter, do the week one game against a ferocious defense, and then just pull them after one bad performance. They also have the revenge game in week two against the Bengals. After that, it's week three against the Browns. I would say the earliest that we could hope Fields to get out there would be week 4 before they play the Lions. And that would be, a 1-2 start, maybe 0-3 even. Bengals can put up points this year, and Dalton just doesn't have it out there. Maybe if he blows it week 2, they can go as early as week 3. But if he can get like a 3-2 start and play competently, week 4 is against the Lions, week 5 is against the Raiders, and we got the Packers, Buccaneers, 49ers, Steelers. I get it. Any of those defenses could produce, the sort of falling out that leads to Fields being out there. But just the more you look at that start, guys, it could be until week 11 after the week 10 bye before we truly see Fields out there against Rams, Bengals, Browns, Lions, Raiders, Packers, Bucks, 49ers, Steelers. I just think that opening stretch where when after the Rams, Browns defense will be better this year, so they aren't a cakewalk. But getting the Bengals, Lions, and Raiders in 3 of your first 5 games for someone that's trying to keep the starting quarterback job, that's a pretty good draw for Dalton. So I do think Fields will be out there. Gun to my head, I would say week 4. I think that's a little hopeful. I think the realistic range of outcomes is between week 3 and week 11, though, and it really has a chance to be stretched throughout that entire way. So just keep that in mind when we're going through this. With that say, though, everyone, and I've made this point in these podcasts before, we don't necessarily need to look at Fields in terms of his total year-round production, because when we kind of have these quarterbacks with in ranking competitions, like I've tweeted this out and just kind of looking at how we should be kind of treating rankings versus actually who we're going to pick on our fantasy team. Like, if you want to come in first in the Fantasy Pros median rankings competition, you should probably be giving guys like Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, you should be ranking them ahead of Fields and Trey Lance, because they're going to start 17 games in all likelihood. Fields and Lance will not. But here's the thing. Who do you want on the field at the, in week 10 when they're all starting? We're going to want Lance. We're going to want Fields out there. And it's just one of these things where I don't want to, be a ranking slave. I don't want to play it safe. Finishing 4th in your league gets you nothing. We're playing first for last, baby. So we got to be going for that upside. Just be careful about, relying too much on, 17 game projections, when in reality, we're trying to win each and every week. And Lance and Fields, once they are starting, they're going to be borderline QB1s at worst. So that takes us right to the rank. I have Fields right now as my QB 18 ahead of guys like Trevor Lawrence, Carson Wentz, Kirk Cousins. I do give Lance the nod in redraft, and that's basically Kyle Shanahan versus Matt Nagy. Give me Shanahan in that conversation. Also Ryan Fitzpatrick, Baker Mayfield. I'll take guys that have the 17 start, more likely than these rookies if they've already proven they can be a great fantasy quarterback, like Baker, like Fitzpatrick. But we haven't seen that, with Wentz recently. Cousins is a little more iffy. I wouldn't be against putting him ahead of these guys potentially. I'm starting to come around to him a little more. But, Wentz, Jameson, some of these other guys where it's a little bit iffy. And so Justin Fields, QB 18, I think he's someone that you'll be happy is on your fantasy team. And if you're in just a one quarterback redraft league, guys, you really don't need to worry about it too much because I think he'll probably be on waivers, and not even really being held to a roster spot. So just realize, with Lance and with Fields, these are guys where even if we don't have the assurance of a 17-game stretch, that's being baked into their draft positions already, and it might be baked into it more than it should be when considering who we won one given week versus the entire season. So thank you, as always, for tuning in to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. New episodes every single day throughout the summer. Going to start really ramping some things up here this week, too. We're going to do some team preview series, special probably Thursday or Friday edition with my guy, Andrew Erickson. Going to start getting some analysts from around the industry out here as well. So thank you again for tuning in. I'm Ian Hartitz, and until next time, take care, everybody.